2 weeks ago, I caught a bad case of Bummyness.
Shut your ass up!
Experiencing symptoms like waking up at 2 in the afternoon, binge watching all 6 seasons of Peaky Blinders in 4 days, and not uploading on YouTube for 2 weeks. So what the happened? Stage 1 of excuses. Other people. My first instinct was to turn my head and blame my parents. I was staying and visiting with them, and you've heard the saying, you're an average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, and I was spending time with people who are about to retire and on vacation. Not exactly the best energy to be around if you're trying to be on your grind. And, there's some merit to that, but that's not fully it. The plan was always for me to stay in Switzerland with them for about a month, and then when it approached my time to go, me and my sister hopped on a bus and went to Paris.
Look, I was on a little whip.
She went to go hang out with a boy for the week, while I went to go get my fix of romance by hanging out with my friends Pablo and Rachel and third wheeling them for the whole day. And it was good. I love the big city energy, and Paris definitely has that. So that night, after some travel complications, I got back to my Airbnb and I was ready to get back on my YouTube grind. So I sat down with the intentions of making a video on my reflections of Paris, and I probably wrote for about 5 minutes, had no inspiration, and then proceeded to scroll through Instagram and YouTube for the next 2 hours, and falling asleep, waking up, and spending like an hour in bed doing the same thing before I finally willed myself to get up and out of the apartment. This brings me to stage number 2 of excuses, your environment. In this case, I was ready to blame technology. It's social media's fault. It's addicting, and unfortunately my job, my interests, my goals, all pretty much live on top of it. But I recognized this in myself, and it was enough to give me inspiration on a YouTube video about how dangerous and addictive social media can be. So the next day, when I was out on my tourist adventures, I noticed how many people were on their phones. It's one thing to be on your phone taking photos, even if you look cringy. And even these people who were ostrich necking down into their phones while walking through these historic landmarks, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that they were sending an important text or checking directions. But the most egregious fault was when I was at the Eiffel Tower and saw multiple people sitting there by themselves scrolling through TikTok, when they could have tilted their head 10 degrees and seen the most iconic building, sculpture, tower, whatever you want to call it, in the entire world.
Your software's better in, your phone knows everything. If anything is getting George Orwellian.
But the worst part about all of this is that I was filming B-roll of these people and actively thinking in my head of a script I was going to write, making fun of how cringy they were. But then, the next day, I went to
Sacré-Cœur Montmartre.
Sacré-Cœur Montmartre. This cathedral that looked over the whole city. And there was this hill that you could kind of sit on. And I went and I sat by myself for a second. And just out of habit, I opened up my phone and went straight to Instagram. Even though this whole thing was at the top of my mind, I still found myself falling into the exact same trap that I was making fun of. And so again, blaming social media is pretty base. There's a really strong case to be made that technology is waging a war on attention, and it has better weapons than it's ever had in the history of humans. And I think it's good to be aware of this fact so that you don't judge yourself too harshly, and so that you can do things to counteract it. When I'm at home, I put my phone in a drawer when I'm trying to work, but this is not a foolproof fix. I've gone down this road before. I've deleted Instagram 100 times. I put my phone in black and white, but I still end up relapsing on my addiction, and I'm still not addressing the root cause. So this leaves the final stage of excuses. Once you strip away blaming others and blaming your environment, the only thing that's left is yourself and your own faults. And it's easy to get here and then start ragging on yourself.
Like, oh, I'm lazy, I don't have the willpower, why do I keep doing this?
And all of that is probably true to an extent. And I'm not one of those sunshine and rainbow people who thinks,
you should never be hard on yourself, you're always right.
Because you're not. Chances are you are lazy and you are shit and you aren't living up to your potential. But I found for myself that being overly judgmental is not super effective, because instead of channeling my self-improvement motivation to something actually productive, it ends up just going to shutting myself down even more. To be honest, I don't know how the fuck my brain works like 95% of the time. This has been one of the biggest insights for me in practicing meditation, is that when I started, I would sit there and try to just focus on my breathing. I would not be able to go longer than 10 seconds without being distracted by some random thought. It's crazy to realize that unless you make an active effort, you probably have way less control over your thoughts and actions than you think you do. But anyways, I sat down and I asked myself, why do you keep falling into social media addiction loops? What is the hole you're trying to superficially fill with YouTube videos and Instagram reels? And why don't you always do the things that you know that you should be doing? And what could I practically do that would help? And I genuinely sat there and thought about it and wrote out my answers because I find it easier to think when you can go back and read. I'm not gonna share my answers because one, why should you care? And two, you already know the answers for yourself. You just need to sit down and give yourself the chance to think about it.
I may be just like you.
And how's this Airbnb setup?